Welcome, everyone. I'm Juliette Brody, the faculty director of the Haas Center for Public Service here at Stanford. And on behalf of the center, it's my pleasure to welcome you all to this 2026 Mimi and Peter E. Haas Distinguished Visitors panel discussion, the title of which is Better Solutions, Better Outcomes, Innovation in the Public Sector. I want to extend a special welcome to current and former members of the Haas Center's National Advisory Board who've joined us today. We are so grateful for your leadership and your partnership in supporting students, faculty, and staff in their community-engaged work. I really want to thank the Haas Center staff who did all the work to make tonight possible, especially Katie Avila and Jordan Denon, who are here somewhere. Raise your hands. Let's thank them. So much, there they are, so much work goes into events like this behind the scenes, so we are in good hands and grateful for it. Thank you so much. I also, of course, want to thank and acknowledge Mimi Haas for her visionary leadership and foundational support of the Distinguished Visitors program. Tonight's event, I'm happy to host it here at my home school, the law school, and to thank the Levin Center for Public Service and Public Interest Law, which is the co-sponsor of this event. The Levin Center is, of course, an organization near and dear to my heart. Their work intersects with the Haas Center's very deeply and naturally by supporting students in public interest law, internships, pro bono work, and public and postgraduate careers. So thank you to the Levin Center. The Distinguished Visitor Program brings to campus leaders whose lives and careers have had significant public impact and who have distinguished themselves through public service. Their presence on campus reflects the larger university commitment. We all know that when Jane Stanford founded the university, she expressed the hope that students would become successful not only in their own lives, but also be of greater service to the public. And it is to that mission that the Haas Center and so many of us here today dedicate ourselves. That vision continues through Cardinal Service, the university-wide effort administered by the Haas Center to connect students with meaningful opportunities for principled public service through a variety of modalities, including community-engaged courses across the curriculum, research, summer internships, and more. In recent years, we've expanded the Distinguished Visitor Program to welcome 4 fellows who not only join us for public events like this one, but also spend time engaging with students and faculty and connecting with partners in the community. In the spring quarter, they will also be co-teaching a course, Challenging the Status Quo, Innovation in the Public Sector, with Kathleen Kelly-Janis, who's here. Thank you, Kathleen, for being here and for your partnership. Guiding students in hands-on community-based projects connected to their work. Now, this year's fellows are leaders in the field of innovation in the public sector. There's a different theme every year for our Distinguished Visitor panel and program, and this one feels especially urgent right now. All 4 are working here in California to strengthen public systems so that they better serve our communities, particularly those who have been so often overlooked. As a lawyer and one who has worked extensively with local and state governments and with the communities that seek to hold government to account for solving the problems of real people, especially those whose interests are not represented by typical lobbying concerns, I am particularly excited about this year's Distinguished Visitor theme. And now it's time to introduce our panelists. First, moderating tonight is Eva Acevedo. Eva is a senior majoring in public policy and minoring in earth systems. Eva's research focuses on environmental justice policy, as well as how farm worker communities face policy challenges across labor rights, healthcare, and education. She serves as an advisor. There's more. She's one of the student members of our National Advisory Board for the Haas Center and also serves on the Advisory Board of Partnerships for Climate Justice in the Bay. And she is president of Stanford Women in Politics. Welcome, Eva. Can you tell she has a lot of proud mamas in the room? Now for our distinguished visitors. Kris Perry is the Executive Director of Children and Screens, Institute of Digital Media and Child Development, a nonprofit helping children thrive in a digital world. She also hosts the Institute's Webby-nominated programs, Screen Deep and #Ask the Experts. Previously, Perry served as Senior Advisor to Governor Gavin Newsom and as Deputy Secretary of California's Health and Human Services Agency. Welcome, Kris. Reggie Young is the Executive Director of the Alameda County Community Food Bank, a nonprofit dedicated to ending hunger through direct services and system change. The food bank provides, are you ready, the equivalent of 50 million meals annually, invests in local farms, and was the first food bank in California to receive health insurance reimbursement for providing medically supportive groceries. Welcome, Reggie. Libby Schaaf was mayor of Oakland from 2015 to 2022. She founded Oakland Promise and has continued advancing cradle-to-career support through a fellowship at Harvard. She currently teaches public budgeting, public-private partnerships, and climate politics at UC Berkeley, we forgive her, and Northeastern University. And she serves as HUD's appointee to the Bay Area Metropolitan Transportation Commission and Housing Finance Authority. Welcome, Libby. Finally, Thomas Lee is the CEO of First Place for Youth, a national organization supporting young people exiting foster care across California and 6 other states. He has turned decades of hands-on experience and research into policy changes that make child welfare more equitable and help young people secure stable housing, education, and career pathways, and the confidence to pursue their goals. Welcome, Thomas. I'm sure you can understand why we are so excited to welcome this extraordinary quartet of leaders to our community for tonight's panel and for programming throughout the spring quarter. We need all of this work and more to make lasting change in our world. We are so thrilled to have Kris, Reggie, Libby, and Thomas on campus, and we look forward to the conversation this evening. Ava, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Juliet, and thank you all so much for being here tonight. We're very excited to speak with you. And yes, just to kick off our panel today, if you could tell us a story, not just your bio, but something that really stood out to you and made you realize that your work really mattered and what you were doing was tangible.
Looks like they want me to start. All right. So I'm going to tell you a story about a young lady named Crystal. I went to elementary school with her father. 4th grade, he and I were in the same classroom in Altadena, California. And his family gave the principal and leadership of the school to paddle him if he were to ever fall out of line when he was in school. So there were days where the principal would come to the classroom if he was being unruly. They would take him out of the classroom, had a big wooden paddle just like he was being pledged at the local fraternity, and they paddled him right in the hallway with the doors open so everyone could hear. And this was just at the age of 8 years old. Fast forward to 2017. Young lady walks into my office looking for help because she's about to transition out of foster care. She's 18 years old, she's a native of Altadena, and she is incredibly bright, full of energy, but at the same time, she had some exposure of being sexually trafficked when she was 14 years old. She'd also been in juvenile hall, as you can imagine, because of it. And as she starts telling me her story about how she needs the support of a program that's going to give her a place to stay, teach her life skills, help her find a job, help her enroll in school because she's got dreams of one day starting her own nonprofit. I'm listening to this story, and as she continues to tell it, she says that that boy that I just told you about in elementary school, that was her father. I remember it well because when I asked her, I said, who's your father? And she says, well, his name is Rodney. And I said, Rodney? He's like, yeah, Rodney. And I won't go into his last name, but I knew exactly who she was talking about. And Rodney spent the most of his life, his adult life, in prison. And when he wasn't, he took out his traumas on his child. So we see the cyclical effect of trauma, foster care, and how it will continue to cycle in this way if we don't do something substantial about it. So in that moment, when she told me that story, I felt it was an imperative that I admitted her to her program and put all the support around her. Crystal is now 33 years old. She has her own nonprofit. She has won several major lawsuits because of her travels in and out of different communities. She's unfortunately come into contact with law enforcement. And when she was ever treated unjustly, she had the wherewithal to reach back and say, I've got this problem. This happened to me. What can I do? Who can I talk to? And in all those instances, we connected her to attorneys, advocates, people in the know, the broader community. And what ended up happening, one of those cases became legal precedent of how law enforcement ought to handle any kind of contact with young women, or with women in general. And so Crystal, she's now a mother. And again, she had one foot in what they call the life and one foot in the world of possibility. And over time, through support, care, and love, she was able to get both feet into the right square. And so this is one of the real examples that I've seen that if we start treating young people who have experienced foster care like they're our own, if we start to remember that even though they have parents, they belong to all of us in society. This is how we can create the conditions for change.
I think that I'm up. It's 1999. It's my second day at my new job working for the president of the Oakland City Council. Now, I had just come from the biggest, fanciest law firm in Oakland, but I was told that not only was I going to be doing the policy work for the council member, I also would do constituent work. And this is day two. I was told to go down to an apartment complex in the San Antonio neighborhood of Oakland, in East Oakland, and talk to a tenant that needed our help and support with her living conditions. I went down, I knocked on the door, a lovely woman invited me in. I walked in the door and I realized that the carpet was soaking wet. I realized it smelled very bad. She brought me back, and the toilet had been overflowing throughout her entire apartment. She and I did not speak the same language. She lifted up a stack of infant clothes that had been laundered, soaked in raw sewage. These are the conditions that not just she was living in every day, but everyone in that apartment complex called the Oak Park Apartments was living in every day. Now, I went back to City Hall and I thought, I have no idea how to help this mother, how to help this community. But I am going to figure it out. And so I just started making calls. I felt very stupid, I have to say. My law degree did not serve me in that moment. And over time, what a privilege to be in that much proximity to people who need your help, that have real problems, and to start translating their challenges into a policy or public solution. And to recognize that some of our public systems have made certain assumptions that do not apply to some of the people who need government the most. This apartment complex was purposely leased to immigrants. that the landlord knew would not call the city to complain because they came from countries where if they called to complain, they would get disappeared. We not only gained the trust of those tenants, we sued the landlord. We got the tenants $1 million settlement. We secured financing to get the property transferred to affordable housing. And now that beautiful apartment complex is permanent affordable housing. In fact, a little girl who grew up there was the architect on the rehab project. And we changed the way that we were doing our code compliance work so that we did proactive inspections where we saw patterns of problems. This is a place where AI and technology could help people, and not just depended on complaints. And that was the day I knew I had made the right career decision.
One of the interesting things to me about the space that I'm in is that when you do direct service work, people feel it immediately. There are many times where I'm walking around in our community with my logo of my organization on, and somebody will stop me in the grocery store or stop me at a restaurant or stop me within a park and tell me about their connection to our organization. So I'm always reminded about how impactful the work that we do is for people throughout our community. But let me take you back a little bit to the beginning of the pandemic, and I remember, well, you should remember the images of the long lines of cars of people trying to get access to food because they didn't have it. There was one distribution that I will always remember where we were coordinating those cars at a distribution that we were doing, trying to ensure that those people got a variety of food items. And a woman called me over and was like, excuse me. Can you tell me how long it's going to take for me to get food? Because I am running out of gas. And I looked in the backseat of her car, and there was an infant in a car seat. I share that story for a number of reasons. But the main reason is that the work that I do is not necessarily about food. The work that I do is about people. And it's people that are experiencing real challenges and have to make real decisions for them and their families on a daily basis. She was there for the food, but for her, the reality is that food, and for a lot of our clients, is a resource to help supplement all these other costs that they're dealing with throughout their lives. In that moment, we gave her a gas card and we expedited some food to her so she can get on her way. But the tough choices that people have to make on a daily basis between food, between housing, between medicine, between education, these are real challenges that people are dealing with on a daily basis. The food is just a resource. It has a monetary value. It has a nutritious value that's utilized to supplement these other costs. And in my industry, rent always eats first. And so when we think about this work, a lot of times what I try to make resonate with people is that we ensure that they know it's not about the food. It's about ensuring that our community can thrive in the way that they deserve.
In 1996, a book was published called Neurons to Neighborhoods. Bill and Hillary Clinton hosted a summit at the White House a few months after its publication, and they invited researchers and celebrities and thought leaders from all over the country to come to a White House summit on early childhood development. One of those attendees was Rob Reiner. He came back to California and thought, I now know that the science is clear, that an early investment in children, especially those living in poverty, will change the trajectory of their whole life. and he went to work. He started the campaign for Proposition 10, which was a tobacco tax that passed. So the voters of California got behind this idea that if you invest early, there will be bigger returns. That led to the creation of First 5 California, First 5 San Francisco, First 5 San Mateo. I was fortunate to take over First 5 San Mateo in the year 2000. And one of the things I did right away was visit a school in Ravenswood, just a few miles from here. And I visited the early childhood program, and they took me on a tour, and I was struck by the fact that the kids were divided into quadrants by chain link fence. And I asked why. Why are they not all playing together? And the director said, well, they can't because we get 4 different funding streams, and they have different rules. Some of them have to have a ratio of 1 to 10, some have a ratio of 1 to 8, some have to be done at 4, some can be done at 5. Some have to have a BA level teacher, some don't. I thought, that's not good. So we went back to the office and we looked at this amazing gift of these new funds, and we went to work with all the leaders. There are 11 cities in San Mateo County. And we brought them all together. We said, what can we do to make the early learning environments in San Mateo more hospitable, more fair? And we created something called Universal Preschool in San Mateo County. We piloted it. And it got the attention of other counties nearby. San Francisco started, Los Angeles started. Sacramento said, we need to do something statewide. And then Rob was chair of the First 5 California Commission. And I was fortunate to go there and work with him for a little while on expanding early learning programs across the state with those precious tobacco tax dollars that were the result of researchers putting their work to work and making it more political, thinking about scale, thinking about access and equity. It was a justice issue. Those kids are now 26 years old, 30 years old. And they were just down the street, and now the kids that are playing on that playground are all playing together because we made a difference in the way that we regulate early learning to create more fairness and justice.
Thank you all so much for those incredible stories. And now I'm going to pivot a little bit to some individual questions. So Reggie, you've said that our current reality doesn't have to be a future because it's actively being created and actively being designed. So who's designing it and what are they looking for?
Yeah. So we're all designing it in real time. I think the way I kind of describe it is that the present is essentially the current reality that we're in. And we have the opportunity to decide whether or not we choose that this current reality is acceptable for us. The way that we kind of think about our work is the goal is not what is happening today. The goal is justice. And what I mean by that is that justice looks like systems that constantly and continuously work for everybody in their best interests. For me, if that's the goal, that's where we all collectively have to bring our collective knowledge, our wealth, our experiences, our presence to actively work towards and create a new reality that looks and goes closer to a space in which justice is actually achieved. In my work, I always think about the intersectional nature of the challenges our community is dealing with. As I mentioned before, a person that comes to a pantry is not only thinking about food, they're thinking about housing, they're thinking about education, they're thinking about all of these things that really matter to ensure that they can thrive. In that context, what sense does it make for different sectors who service the same populations to work distinctively away from each other? It doesn't make sense. However, the funding models create the environment to keep that separated. The way that we talk about our work keeps those same divisions in place consistently. It is all of our responsibility to create a reality that is different than what it is today, Because for me, this is the low bar. When we can absolutely create an environment where all of our communities can share in joy, can share in great lives for their families, and can share in a future that benefits everyone. All that to say, we all got to do something, and we all can do something, and we invite you to join us in that battle.
Thank you so much, Reggie. And Kris, I'd like to ask you, how has your work as a civil servant better prepared you for all the roles that have followed, both as a plaintiff and also in your current role?
Well, it's been a great joy to spend most of my career in public service, starting out as a child abuse investigator in Alameda County, and then moving into various administrative roles, and then getting to be a part of the First Five movement, and then being a part of the Newsom administration, and realizing these dreams that started at the very beginning, and seeing kids living their lives a certain way, and then seeing the state really move in a better direction. And by being a public servant, you learn a lot about transparency and scale. And you learn a lot about the public good, public process, but you also learn a lot about red tape. And one of the things that I've been so excited about here just these last few days at Stanford is learning about there are people and there are regulations, and we conflate the two and we confuse the two, and sometimes we think we need to get rid of the people to make the system work better, but really sometimes when you work in public service long enough, you realize it's the regulations that are causing the people to go at the rate they're going. So there's this great joy in working at scale, but it also means you go slower. It also means you have to engage in more public input and more transparency. You can't just pick your friends to do work with you. You have to make it available to everyone. And I learned maybe the greatest thing of all, which is that you have to have your hair on fire, but be patient at the same time. So somebody made the smartest thing. No, they came into my office, the former Secretary of Health and Human Services, when I was appointed to the role I had in 2019, and she said, hey, people are going to come to you every day and tell you that you should do this and you should do that. You better know what the two things are you're going to do before you leave here. You better know or you won't do them. And I was really fortunate to work with some really smart people in the governor's office who had similar goals, and they wanted to work on a master plan for early learning and care, which of course was a dream of mine. And the only way to get that done in a few short years was for them to also ensure that it was in the legislation allowed for fast track contracting. Now this is getting really wonky, but it can take almost 4 years to get a contract through the state of California. Well, that's how long it takes to be a young child. So we knew that we had to go faster than that. So we were really fortunate to have the mandate to get a plan done, also that we could fast track, and that we had people like me that had been in civil service long enough to know that we just needed to focus on a few key goals, and one of them was the master plan for early learning and care. It was a really big honor to go from that moment in 2000 when I started in San Mateo County all the way to the governor's office in 2020, 2021 and see that master plan implemented and transitional kindergarten fully implemented.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. And for the next question, I'm going to open it up to the rest of the group again and ask exactly what you were talking about. Public sector work often moves very slowly by design, so with accountability, process, oversight as features and not just bugs. But meaningful change often requires speed and risk. So have you all found a way to hold both of those at the same time, or do you think that that tension is something that's truly not able to be solved?
I think the tension is irresolvable. Can you all hear me? Only because in every jurisdiction where you're trying to change systems and get systems to work better on behalf of the people, they have their own dynamics, their own personality, their own barriers for moving. And so it requires relationships. It also requires a certain intentionality and discipline to stay very focused and give each particular system, jurisdiction, region, the kind of time, energy, and focus it deserves in order to move it. And I think you also have to couple it with a counter system to the existing one. You can't walk in the door and say, I'd like to be able to implement a new way of serving foster youth in Santa Clara County if you don't have a plan that could be easily coupled with it and help the change move at a very rapid pace if it is adopted. And so one of the things that we've learned over time with our national work at First Place for Youth is that, one, we have to value the relationships that have to be developed. We also have to bring an answer to some of the solutions that we're proposing, and an answer that is easy to plug and play. So when the system is recalcitrant and very rigid about thinking about doing things differently, we could give them the path of least resistance and create a level of ease when it's moving forward toward adoption. And then again, lastly, to your other part of the question, there's the question of speed that you mentioned. The speed is also something that Reggie spoke about, and I'll say something about it too that I think is important, and as well as Kris. Young people that are aging out of foster care, that's happening daily. Every single day, there's a new cohort of thousands of young people leaving foster care. They needed support yesterday. And if we sit back and wait for the system to get its act together, the time, the window of opportunity that we have to help them and propel them to where they should be in life in terms of their ambitions and dreams, we will have missed that moment waiting on a system. And so that's where it's incumbent upon all of us to create those opportunities, to leverage the relationships that we all have with certain systems and certain people and certain leaders and potential ambassadors and advocates. This is the collective action that has to happen in order to get systems to move at the speed that we need. But we have to first recognize that we don't have a moment to waste, especially when our youth are counting on us to get this problem solved yesterday.
I think it's a bug. I don't think it's a feature. And I think democracy was invented as a deliberative process at a different time when society was not moving as fast as it is moving now. I'm not saying I have the solution for revising democracy. I just want to name it. I will say, as mayor, this was my jam. I got very good at innovating on the edge of government. I took a page from the example of public education funds. They are independent nonprofit organizations that exist to support improvement in a public institution. So I created one for the city of Oakland. It's called the Oakland Fund for Public Innovation. It's actually still doing very well. Go onto its website, donate. And it allowed me to do my janky experimentations, not with the taxpayer dollar. I mean, you talked about risk aversion. Taxpayers do not like you experimenting with their money. They're far more forgiving if you do it with someone else's. And so as homelessness was exploding, I'll give you one example of how we utilize this tool. Homelessness is exploding. I tell my staff, like, this is not acceptable. Bring me something, anything, to help address this. And so they came back with this idea to find empty lots near existing encampments and to put, yes, tough sheds on those lots and to try and get the community as a whole to move into those tough sheds. And I won't get into how homelessness funding works. It is worse than the 4 playgrounds. It's like 26 playgrounds. It is ridiculous. So I'm telling you, people were losing their minds. They're like, the mayor is putting people in garden sheds. I wouldn't put my leaf blower there. These are concentration. I mean, there's just a lot of criticisms. And every time someone held the mic to me, and they did all the time, like, how can you do this? And I said, doing nothing is worse. Like, this status quo is unacceptable. And what's great about experimenting with private dollar is that you start to fix things. You make the adjustments. You get to a model that is actually absolutely exemplary. And it's funny, I was just listening to a podcast with Matt Mahan describing his approach to homelessness, and it literally was word for word exactly what we developed in Oakland with the private dollar. And once we had worked the kinks out and developed a beautiful system, then we could bring it to the city council who, trust me, they were, making the leaf blowing comments, then they were ready to fund it with the public dollar. And there was a whole constituency that lined up at that microphone and said, this works. This works in a way that we've never seen before. And my favorite part of the story is we had a little reception to thank all the donors that allowed us to make this experiment happen, including, by the way, an elementary school where the students held bake sales until they raised enough money to buy one cabin. It was the sweetest thing ever. But one of my deputy city managers got up and said, in my 30 years as a civil servant, I have never been given permission to fail. Thank you for giving us permission to fail, improve, and then succeed.
I'll be quick with my answer because I know we're a little over time. But I will just say I love this question because it creates some dissension on this panel, which I appreciate. Because the thing that I really love about this is the fact that there's always these moments in which you see government collaborating with the nonprofit sector, with the for-profit sector in times of emergency, really fast. We don't even have to go back that far. We can just look at the government shutdown. When the government shutdown came and so many people were out of SNAP benefits, the county, our food bank, philanthropy, for-profit institutes came together really fast to try to strengthen that safety net so that people did not go hungry. How do we leverage what we learned during those times? I mean, let's just talk about the pandemic. During the pandemic, we saw child hunger go down. We saw poverty to go down in that time frame because we saw government acting in a way along with everybody else to ensure that that safety net was there for people when they needed it the most. There's something about that to me makes this question almost counterintuitive because absolutely it can work faster. We do it all the time, but we don't do it consistently.
Yeah.
Because when we have a crisis, we're given permission to fail.
Right. And how do we establish those conditions all the time?
Yes. Well, thank you so much for answering that. And now to pivot again to some individual questions. Thomas, you're here as a distinguished visitor in part to help guide the next generation of policymakers and leaders. So what is one thing that you most need people in rooms like this to understand about foster youth that's been largely invisible?
Well, the good news is that we all love a good foster care story. From Star Wars to Superman to Batman and Robin and Spider-Man.
Harry Potter.
Yes.
There's a number of shows that I can mention. We actually love a good foster care story. Hollywood loves creating these new franchises of stories about foster youth. In fact, at First Place, we're a part of a special initiative with UCLA to be able to add more content and depth and nuance to some of these stories as they continue to get rolled out for public consumption. And so what's positive is that a lot of people love these stories, but what's still missing is understanding the start, the healing that has to happen in the middle, and then we can all collectively celebrate the hero that emerges through the healing and the transformation that happens when we put all of the resources around someone who's in foster care. So that's the beginning. The second part is we've got to do a little bit of inverse thinking and ask ourselves, what will guarantee failure and if we're trying to end homelessness, if we're trying to end poverty, if we're trying to end the pipeline between foster care and prisons, what will guarantee failure is if we don't go upstream and put as much resources and support around foster youth because they are the beginning of that stream and that pipeline to those particular outcomes. And so that's where the action item is for all of us, where we all, well, the call to action for all of us, that's where we have to get activated and figure out how do we start really thinking, and I'm going to use a first time I've ever quoted Tupac, but I'm going to just tell you, Tupac once said, even though I have a mother and father. I'm everybody's child. We have to start thinking about these young people as that they are ours, whether or not they're ours biologically or not. And that's the beginning of the change that we want to see.
Thank you. Great. And Libby, as the former mayor of Oakland, you've been on the inside, not just with the idea of public service, but the actual day-to-day reality of it. What broke your heart a little, and what made you believe it was still worth fighting for?
I mean, I'll be honest, it broke my heart a lot. And probably there's nothing that broke me more than the ghost ship fire. When you activate like a mobile emergency operation, you run it 24 hours, and every role has 2 people in it, except for the mayor. There's only one of me. And I was the one person that went between the actual operation where we were pulling out bodies, 36 bodies of beautiful, creative young people. And I was the liaison between the operational site and the family and friends site. And the fire hose of grief was more than I could bear. And to feel such grief for this loss, to feel like these were my children. In fact, I mean, the first night I went home, my husband put our kids in our bed so I could go to bed with holding my own children because of thinking of the loss that had happened. And then to go to the vigil that I was invited to, and the crowd was so angry at the city government. The crowd was blaming government for this loss. I almost had to be extracted by my security detail because they were worried I would be torn limb from limb by the angry crowd. I was booed down. I was in such a moment of grief myself. And we do have to hold, when we represent governmental power, that power has been abused and misused, and we hold those titles and all that history, no matter who we are, no matter what our hearts are. People in those moments do not see our hearts as people. They see the history of the positions. And so to hold that truth, that horrible truth, and to get up the next moment and to have the hope and belief that we can change these systems, we can restore that faith, that trust. And that is our challenge. And in this time, I know many of us feel that is especially hard. And our governments are our collective best selves. Our democracy is our collective hope, despite that history. And that is what gives me hope, because we can move forward from those tragedies when we have love and compassion.
Thank you so much. Yes, thank you so much for that. And I want to, before we open it up to the audience, I want to do a quick lightning round of what's something that's giving you hope.
We're going to start with Kris.
Well, I talk about hope a lot with you because I look for it everywhere I go. I look for inspiration, and I'm finding it in the artist community. I see the beautiful expression of joy that artists are sharing with us right now while we live through a relatively difficult time. And I also am comforted by the memories I have of the victories in my life, whether they were personal or professional, and my own children, my own family, and the gift of being here and meeting all of you and learning from you. I think it's the willingness to remain open that is helping me feel joy and hope, and I want you all to feel it too. So.
Thank you so much.
Brian Stevenson says hope is our superpower. And I see hope everywhere. I'm inspired by people. I'm inspired by the wisdom that they bring. And I'm inspired by even being on this campus and talking with the students, the professors. You opened the floodgates. You talked about, you said, you quoted Tupac. So I got to quote Tupac. I mean, Tupac said, one of the other things Tupac said, he talked about we have money for wars, but we won't feed the poor. And for me, please clap for that. Yes. We live in one of the wealthiest regions, in the wealthiest state, in the wealthiest country in the world. If we can't solve some of these challenges here, who can? And when I talk to people in my community, in this community, across communities, there's so much to be hopeful because we have the resources and we have the minds to be able to do great things. How we do it is always going to be collectively. And we have to start building bridges amongst people of difference so that we can absolutely start to walk in step with one another.
Brian Stevenson also said
Yes.
that leaders need to be proximate. If we are going to rebuild faith in government, which is our collective best selves, it will happen at local government. So all of you who listen to NPR and The Daily, I admit I love The Daily, there is another layer of government that is not the federal government. And it's not as disconnected. I was going to say something maybe partisan. I will resist. It's not as disconnected because it is proximate to the people. You heard, I have walked on the soiled carpet. I have, when you are the mayor, you are in the community. And so for those of you who are thinking about careers of purpose, please consider local government. It is so impactful and it is so personal. And for those of you who hate red tape, we are in this moment of the abundance movement. The abundance movement gives me hope because it is a very positive frame for accepting that government has gotten too irritating and stupid with the 4 playgrounds. I love that example. I'm going to keep using it. And that it is okay to love government and to admit it's got to work a little better.
Mm-hmm. So there's 3 things that give me hope. Number 1, when I think about the roughly 150 to 200,000 foster youth that are aging out of foster care or in that cohort between ages 18 and 21 across the country, that is a small enough population and a small enough problem for us to solve in our lifetime. And we don't see many problems solved. We just keep hearing how they continue on and on and on, and they remain persistent. This is a solvable problem. We can make sure that every young person, as soon as they turn 18, they have the option of getting help, housing, life skills, education and employment, or they can choose, to try it on their own. Because you know what? Frankly, they are tired of dealing with us grown folk. So that can be solved. That's 1. Number 2, it's the youth themselves. The youth today, it's a generation of some of the most unjudgmental and forgiving and caring and big-hearted people that we have ever seen in our lifetime. They didn't have to come up during the strict ways of what it was like when we were all kids. And they're more accepting of each other and all of us, even in spite of all of our faults. And then lastly, I think about all of these wonderful leaders here, the Stanford community. This is an enormous opportunity for us to collaborate and strategically combine all of our collective wisdom to do something great. And so since we're on the farm, I'm going to quote Deuteronomy 24:9, and it says, Israel commanded its farmers to share their harvest with the fatherless. So this is the opportunity for not only all of us to come together to hopefully inspire the students that we're going to come into contact with, but also Stanford University to bring all of its harvest to help solve some of these big problems that we all passionately care about. So that's what gives me hope.
Thank you all, and now we're going to open it up for a few questions from the audience. And some quick guidelines for the questions. Please keep them to 1 minute or less. Please be respectful of others who have questions. And if needed, please direct to a specific panelist.
I want to thank you for everything that you've shared thus far. And I'm going to preface my question by saying I have been supporting social impact organizations for almost 20 years. But last year, I got my very first email that said, our board president has been abducted by ICE. This has been, in the line of work I do, a moment of really unprecedented fear. And for me, I'm like a systems guy. I spend all day telling folks, we're going to build you not just a strategic plan, but an impact plan. That's a year, right? We're going to do a risk mitigation strategy. I can do that day in, day out. But you're all leaders. And I'm curious for you, what do you tell your staff? How do you, to me, this isn't about hope. What do you tell your staff to help them remain consistent? It's not a particularly pretty question. I'm grateful to you for answering it.
Well, I'm the one who actually, Donald Trump tried to put me in jail 6 years ago this week for warning my community about an ICE raid. And so I tell my staff that there are moments that you resist things that you believe are unjust and not serving our systems. And you can do that in a way that is not, I used storytelling and not name throwing in how we spoke about our job as mayors is to protect our communities, no matter where they came from or how they got here. And that frame of actual what safety is for a community really helped us build the sanctuary city movement during Trump's first term, not shrink it. We actually got people to go towards that status, not away from it. So just being, my husband was like, could we have talked about this before you tried to go to jail? But I think that sometimes when you stand up, that meant a lot to some of my staff. Mm-hmm. I had a high-level staff that was undocumented that really appreciated it.
I'll just add, because we have to stay focused on the larger mission of what we're trying to do, I think there's twofold things. One, remain incredibly disciplined on achieving mission. There's going to always be tons of noise, and if history tells us, this too shall pass. There's been incredible things that have happened throughout the history of all of our lives and things that we've read about before we were all born. And as bad as things seem right now, there were times where our ancestors went through even worse, and they got through those moments. And so we have to trust the wisdom of the ages, as well as continue to acknowledge and support these things as they can become very distracting, can certainly pull you away. There are things outside. Some of these things are outside of our circle of control, and some of them are not. How do we make sure that we stay disciplined on the things that are in our circle of control and stay focused on them is how we stay resilient through these times. And again, continue to always check in with one another because again, after, it's hard to do the work when you have all of that noise and distraction and pain and suffering happening all the time.
Thank you. And first, go ahead.
Ditto. That's exactly it, right? all of us making it to this point in history is not by accident. Our ancestors have gone through so much, and we're still here. We're going to continue to be here. And the thing that I tell my team on a consistent basis is control what you can control. We have to be focused on our mission. Our work is justice focused, and we give space for people to do other things that they need to do in support of the goals that they have, the individual missions that they have as well. For me, this work is about building an ecosystem for everybody to be successful. And in that, there's always going to be something that's challenging that on an ongoing basis. The discipline is important, but also the hope is important as well, because for me, that creates the infrastructure to sustain belief that there's a future that is not this.
The counterfactual is we're not here. That's not okay. So sometimes we have to start every day with, we're still here. We have to be here. If we're not here, then no one will hold up this truth and hold it until there's a change. So I always think of the counterfactual because it's more alarming than the one we're in.
Thank you. And, over here.
California has a revenue system that's an unholy mess. And I can say this because I worked for the revenue agency for 30 years, and it's just, really, really obvious. And every year, sorry. Every year you think it can't get worse, and every year it does get worse. If the California revenue system, let me give you an example that California revenue system does not work if Silicon Valley does not have a good year, if there are not a lot of capital gains coming out of the startups and all like that, if the venture capital stuff just has a down. The effect on that in the state is that they start laying off people, they try to raid the pension systems, they try to do this, that, and everything. It's always the same. And then the Silicon Valley recovers, the state sort of recovers, but for a long time, California just doesn't seem to have enough money. If we're figured out how to fix the system and put into alignment the amount of money we have versus the amount of money we need to spend, would that help you all a lot? Or I assume it would, but we all seem to be talking about, how do we fix this on the margins? Because the underlying assumption is the government just isn't going to work. Is that true? And if it can be fixed, how can it be fixed?
Actually, California has a lot of money. It is very volatile and unpredictable, and it functions within a larger ecosystem of how federal taxation works. And most people, many people, even kind of fiscal conservatives would say we do need to reform Prop 13. Mm-hmm. That we rely on non-property taxes because we're so constrained on property taxes. And also there's starting to be a mounting feeling of unfairness when you have two homes next to each other. I show this slide in my class every time. This house, these two houses are exactly the same, and this tax bill is 25 times higher than the next door neighbors. So that would be my short answer. But we're like all just really emotional leaders, and you're talking about tax policy. I'd love to geek out outside with you afterwards on this topic. It is a very interesting one.
If we did budgets that centered children, they'd be different. If we centered aging communities, if we centered vulnerable communities, and we started our budgets that way, then it would be, these would be really more, they'd be more interesting conversations, wouldn't they? Like everything that everybody up here is trying to do is with what's left over. Because we're not, at this point, none of us are in the public sector. We're all in the nonprofit sector or the teaching profession. And so what we're trying to do is make the most with what's left over and with the kids the communities that need it the most. So I always feel like, to give myself some, just for fun, I'll think, what if we had a child-centered budget in California? What would that even look like? First of all, we'd have paid family leave and a whole lot of it. Second of all, we'd have parental leave beyond that and grandparent leave that goes beyond where we are, but we're better than we were. We'd come up with ways of subsidizing or covering the cost of early learning because we know it's the best investment you can make. We would enrich our K-12 system in a way that would set children on a trajectory that would improve their whole life. We would make higher education, vocational training a priority for everyone that wanted it, no matter where they came from. Housing, transportation, retirement, and healthcare, they would all be handled first. Then we can get to the rest of it. But you bring up the volatility point it's so hard on kids. I mean, that's just what I come back to, that the people who suffer the most are the most vulnerable.
All right, but I just have to say one more thing in defense of California. California, every state, every local government, we have to pass a balanced budget by law. The federal government is the only layer of government that gets a credit card. So none of these things can happen, Kris, unless the federal government actually takes on their responsibility to
Right,
take care
and they
of
start with the defense budget, and then they get to the non-defense discretionary budget.
Right.
And again,
saying it's not just a
after they
California
pay
problem.
themselves to get the defense budget done, and then we get to the NDD budget, which is what's left over. I mean, it is. You're absolutely right, but it's also a great example of how we're still doing that to ourselves as a nation.
Thank you. It's interesting that there has been a lot of innovation in our states and cities, for better or worse. Like we have SB 79, or we have universal pre-K, and on the private side you have Waymo, or you have Flock. So what kind of technologies or social change do you think is really far-fetched today, but will actually happen in the next 5 or 10 years?
One thing I worry about is not so much the way technology's disrupted attention, but the way it will disrupt attachment. And as social animals, as individuals who are human and embody our humanity, the way technology has moved into the business of relationships is worrisome to me as somebody who cares about kids, because their brains are developing in such a way that it's easy for them not to be able to discern or detect something that's not real, but a machine. So one thing that I worry about for all of us is, again, the younger generation not being sort of practiced on with technology that is mimicking humanity, so that they are then not able to develop in the way that they should, whether that's something as simple as eye contact during feeding, to teachers replaced by technology, to friends and loved ones replaced by technology. I know that might sound far-fetched, but I think
It's happening.
it's happening. And
happening.
it's one thing for adults to go and train a model to be friendly. It's really a different thing for a 5-year-old or a 10-year-old. So I think I'm more worried about some worrisome outcomes. As much as I love the cool stuff like cars that drive you around.
I'll give the tech optimist twist on that. I would love to see AI doing all the administrative work that government civil
that
servants
could
do
be.
now, so we could actually increase the human-to-human time. So I would love to also allow that to let us customize, whether it's education or any sort of public service, that we are able to customize and meet people where they're at. The mother at Oak Park Apartments is going to have a different need than you will. And if somebody else is doing the paperwork, the public servant can actually be present, proximate with the people. That's my hope.
I love that. I'm going to add something more, even to add on to the optimism. I hear a lot of economists and people talk about the shifting labor markets and where there's going to be a shortage of labor, a shortage of people to take certain skilled jobs. I'd love to see foster youth made as a priority to get access into a pathway to some of those careers that are going to be shifting with the current technological landscape that's emerging right now. And like I said, we're talking about 150 to 200,000 young people across the country. It's very hard to imagine these different careers if you've never been exposed to them and if you haven't had somebody walk alongside you and give you a chance to open up the aperture and see what's possible with this, with the way the world is shifting and changing. And so that could be a huge opportunity, and again, a win for us all if we start thinking differently.
I'm going to take this a little different way. I loved your question about technologies that could be useful in the future. The truth is, I work at a nonprofit. There's technologies that are useful right now that we can't afford. So my hope is that nonprofits, governmental entities can actually take advantage of the technologies in real time as they are today, because we are locked out of it in a lot of different ways because of the monetary challenges that we struggle with.
I like that. Right. We have time for one more question. Right over here.
Hi, my name is Diego Medina Gutierrez. I'm a first-year student here at Stanford, and I'm from the Central Valley of California. And thank you guys so much for being here with us today. And I'm sure from your guys' journey in the public sector, you guys have had many mentors or opportunities to meet with other people who have experience in continuing the causes that you guys are interested in. So my question to you is, what advice would you give applying the wealth of knowledge learned at Stanford or any other institution, and how can we translate that into tangible impact in our communities that we call home?
I have a funny answer. You know, I'm sure your professors here are great, but like, get every single like phone number, email address of every student you ever come in contact with, and stay in touch with them. I think we all underestimate human connection as the thing that really is what has made us all successful, and actually also gets us through our hard times. Yeah. So, you know, I'm sure your education is great. Your network is even greater.
Yeah.
And stay curious.
Yeah. Last night, Reggie and I were having dinner, and we were talking about just this. And when I talk to lots of young people like yourself, you're piggybacking on Libby's thought, your network will determine your net worth. And I'm not just talking about it in a monetary sense, I'm just talking about the value of human relationships. And like Libby said, who can you call on in an emergency? Who can you call on just to talk about a zany idea that you want to test out? And then also, who can you call on, or who can call on you when they say, you know what, I was thinking about you. I think you'd be fantastic for this role I heard about over in Palo Alto. I want to get you connected. Those networks that you develop right now will follow you for the rest of your life, and they will have a compounding benefit. And so it's really important to listen to that wisdom and nurture all of the relationships. And if you don't have a mentor, not to say you just need one, but start with one, and then you'll ultimately end up having mentors for different moments in life to help you over. So those are really, really important and can never be underestimated.
The thing that immediately comes to mind is that it's really connected to what both of you said. This type of space that the Haas Center is trying to create is designed specifically for that question. Is like, how do you leverage this space? How do you leverage the people around you to do things that are actionable into community? Wouldn't it be beautiful if this room was packed and there was people begging to get in here to answer that exact question that you're talking about, right? The amazing thing about the people that I've met here and the people that I've met as alumnus is that these are folks that are changing the world or have changed the world consistently time after time after time. A lot of them come from here. Some of the challenges that you are thinking about impacting are challenges that were created by people that came from here. The beauty of this time that you have is that you're around the change makers. You can be connected to the alumnus that are changing the world actively. And you, in those relationships you're building with them, could actually shift towards a better future for not only this community, but for everybody that this community impacts across this world.
I grew up in the Central Valley too. We're not that far from there right now. I would say go as far from here as you can go and explore yourself someplace else. I mean, this is very different from where you grew up, but it isn't that different. The state isn't that different overall from the rest of the world. So you're so fortunate that you were here, but you also came from a place that's so essential to the success of this state and is so overlooked. So you can take both of those experiences with you and learn so much and grow so much and bring your relationships with you and expand your network. And you're just so fortunate that you're here. And thank you for that question, because that took a lot of insight. Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Just to your question.
Yes, and thank you. I mean, just as you all discussed, that really gets to the importance of nurturing relationships, because as you have all said, there's a space for all of us in going beyond the status quo and making things better, and nurturing relationships with people around us is really the core in doing that. So thank you. And right now, before we close out officially, I want to bring up some opportunities. We encourage all of you here today to keep up with the Distinguished Visitors and their incredible work. You can visit more information about them on the Haas Center website. And students, we also encourage you to enroll in the class Urban Studies 135, Challenging the Status Quo, Innovation in the Public Sector. And finally, we encourage you to visit the Haas Center website in order to connect with the Distinguished Visitor Program more closely and the panelists' organizations. And right after this, we will have a reception, which should be right outside and out on the balcony outdoors. So thank you all so much for coming.
And to our moderator.
Great job.